There is one really mean way in which political radicalization hijacks our creativity. Creativity is a general feature of consciousness. It is something that we all experience and we all know from within. And it's the experience that you have when you come up with ideas. Those can be in all domains, right? Wherever you're making sense of something, whether it's in music, whether you're coming up with a different interpretation of something, or whether when it's you're thinking about an issue and you're coming up with a new viewpoint on an issue, that felt experience of novelty is something that is among the most motivating experiences that you can have. It is one of the strongest drives that we can experience. And when we're lacking that, when you are in a state of pure passivity and receptivity where you just are given something that you have to adapt to, these, on the other hand, can be states that induce deep suffering in us. Even while we're fed, right? You can be well fed as a person and pretty well off, but when you feel like you're not tapping into that moment of creativity that some people have actually, like in Whitehead, creativity is treated like as one of the most basic foundational features of the cosmos as a whole. And I particularly like the idea that, contrary to the charged spring view, where the idea is that the universe basically is like a charged spring of a clock, just running out all its features that are predetermined and back in the day have already been set into stone by setting into stone the basic laws of behavior and how particles have to configure themselves. Contrary to that view, in which creativity is not possible but everything is just necessary, the creativity notion actually runs on the idea that there's true novelty in the universe. In other words, the possibilities that are given, including to the ways that molecules can get together and form forms, those possibilities are not reached yet. They're open. They're open-ended. In other words, what we'll write, what we'll think, what we'll say in the future is not already pre-written. But these are metaphysical speculations. In I hope in the good sense, speculative philosophy is not just a pejorative term. However, my major point that I want to make is that political polarization actually uses that foundational feature of consciousness to polarize and to induce ideas in our minds that to us feel new. They feel like an expression of our own creativity, and they are, and yet they're predictable. And I think the pattern behind it is that in political discourse, what has significantly changed between what was typical of propaganda a few decades ago, during the Soviet times, and today. Back in the day, you had a few predefined narratives that were sold to people, and you were trying to amplify a signal and make a narrative stick with people. This is not the case today anymore. The thing that is predefined and that is top down, given to be spread and to be amplified, are not ready made narratives, but are ready made frames. And the frames themselves are very much like the different characters that you have in a movie. So you have the Bond villain, right? You have the villain in the movie. You have the traitor. This is a different kind of character. You have the hero, right? You have the companion, the ally. You have all of those frames prefigured and preset, predetermined, and then you throw them out into the space for people to absorb. And then using those frames, of course, people then come up with their own stories, with their own narratives. They build their own narratives that you couldn't predict as the person who is top down generating the frames. You don't know what people will come up with, and you don't know what will actually touch people, what will be really relevant to people, and what will work in what social context. But you're not interested in that because you know that once you have set the frames, once you have set the basic figures which make up the basic uh, um, personas, which make up the movie or the story, whatever story people come up with, it will always play into your own position and it will always strengthen the point that you actually want to make. And the reality of that is we have endlessly many different variations of different ideas, of different narratives that come up, but at the end of the day follow the same structure. They follow the same narrative structure because the elements with which they work are basically always the same or very predictable depending on context. One of the elements, for example, very often used is the elite, like the term that there is a top-down relationship. And this, of course, is it's a cliche. It's as Zach Stein puts it, it's a thought-terminating cliche, right? When you speak about the elite, it's a frame that simplifies reality and makes you feel like you figured something out without even having the need to know anybody who supposedly is elite, without having the need to understand how they think, who they are, whether they actually one group of people, whether they have divergent views on anything. You don't have to be interested in their personal views on anything, so you don't have to be interested in the history of those people growing up and what inspires them, what drives them, what motivates them. And with such thought motivating cliches, thought terminating cliches, or Zach Stein often uses the cliche of the science is settled, then there is no looking further, right? There's no looking anymore into the details. And it helps you to focus your attention on what supposedly matters. And with such cliches, we can build very creative stories. They can sound very interesting. And that act itself is an act of creativity. It is real creativity that is at work here. And when your own creativity is at work and you feel the aha moment, when you're connecting pieces and it all starts to make sense, this experience overrides any factual evidence that you might ever be acquainted with. This overrides any kind of fact. It is more real to us, just as the experience of pain and suffering. Those ground us, and whether we like it or not, in those experiences, at least we feel like we're in touch with reality. And they're not just ideas, but we presence them. And we know we're there, we exist. It's funny how some people even can get out of different forms of depression when they experience physical pain and suffering. It's really weird. It can ground them to feel like they're alive again, in touch with reality. However, still the main point is creativity is like that. Creativity is like pain. It's like suffering. It's like yeah, like falling in love. It's something as real as that, and it's experienced as real as that, and it really trumps arguments and it trumps empirical evidence. And that's the really mean part about the whole thing. It works with an element which is an essential part of your existence, which needs cultivation, which needs its space. It needs to be um, it needs to be something you pay attention to and find a way of expressing it. And yet, political polarization uses precisely that otherwise healthy, and I wouldn't even say healthy impulse. It's like it's at the heart of any motivated individual. I mean, if you can't express some form of creativity, you will have a very difficult time of finding motivation to go further with whatever you're doing. And it's using that to make you believe something that does not really serve your interests, but serves somebody else's interests. So you voluntarily submit yourself to the will of somebody else without noticing it. And while you being involved in this process in a creative way. And that's so evil, mate. It's really it's beyond imagination because instead of focusing your attention on constructive things like you could reinterpret musical pieces, right? You could write your own musical pieces. You could come up with solid structures and concepts about how to grasp reality in certain dimensions, in certain aspects. And instead of doing that, instead of learning to do science and being creative in that domain, or instead of learning the arts and being creative there, or instead of being creative in the sphere of human communication, bringing people together, this is just as real a phenomenon as anything else. Like creatively figuring out ways how to help people communicate with each other. Instead of going on into any of those domains that are constructive, that are in touch with reality, and that make a positive difference to somebody else except yourself, um, we end up caught up in stories which are partly our own fabrication and partly basically life energy wasted on something that's not your own, while it feels like you created it. And of course, that makes you really certain that it must be true, that it must be grounded in reality. Such a weird phenomenon. If you had thought about that and uh, had to invent that, I don't think anyone would ever think of that being possible. I don't know. It's just so genius in an evil way, and yet I think it's possible and it's real, and it's happening. And it's one of these really weird features about being human.